When NASCAR is saying they don't hold back on penalties, they mean don't hold back. Yo, what's up everyone? My name is Jett. Welcome back to the episode of Inside Lines. Once again, as you can see, I am still in Texas. I'm going to be here until Saturday. By the time we get to racing Sunday at Atlanta, I will be back in my old studio, so this is not going to be for long. But wow, we got some news to talk about here. Hendrick Motorsports, the biggest fine to a team in the 75-year history of NASCAR. I guess every day you're making history as NASCAR is, but wow. Okay, so let's set the scene. So on Saturday, NASCAR took all four, including Justin Haley's number 31 cars, louvers, the hood louvers on top of the next-gen car for inspection. NASCAR determined that they were modified. Now, obviously, with this next-gen car, new rules, more stricter rules to ensure that the competition stays at a level playing field. If those hoods were modified, big penalties would be given to Hendrick Motorsports and Justin Haley's number 31 team, and they were. NASCAR gave them an L2 penalty. The number 5, the 24, and the 48 have all been docked 100 driver points, 100 owner points, and a loss of 10 playoff points. Now, the number 19 was only docked 100 owner points, not driver points, considering that Chase Elliott wasn't driving the car at Phoenix and Josh Berry is competing for the Xfinity Series title, not the Cup Series title. Now, also Justin Haley and his team, they were given the same fine and penalty. 100 driver, 100 owner points, docked, loss of 10 playoff points, and the crew chief suspended for 4 races, as well as fined $100,000. Also, all 4 Hendrick Motorsports teams also fined $100,000 for the crew chief and suspended for 4 races. Now, Hendrick Motorsports' response to this is quite curious. It's quite interesting. They're going to appeal the penalty, but they're not going to appeal the suspension, meaning that the 4 crew chiefs, including at Hendrick Motorsports, they will be suspended for 4 races, but they're going to appeal the penalty, specifically the points penalty, and for good reason. I mean, look at how this affects Hendrick Motorsports. Alex Bowman, who was the points leader after Phoenix, is now outside of the top 20. Bowman drops from 1st to 23rd in the point standings. William Byron drops from 4th to 29th in points. Kyle Larson drops from 5th to 32nd, and Justin Haley is now 49th in points, minus 40. So at the moment, you and me have more points than Justin Haley. And in a weird twist, Chase Elliott, because he didn't race, he didn't lose any points, goes from 29th to 26th in points. So yeah, big penalties. But again, it's consistent with NASCAR. We saw last year with the 34 team and the 6 team, they modified parts of the next-gen car they weren't allowed to modify. Boom, given the same suspension, L2 penalty. It's consistent, which is like what we want to see from NASCAR. Elton Sawyer, who oversees, that type of competition aspect at NASCAR, said that it was obvious when they reviewed the hood lovers that they were obviously modified and they obviously had to give them this L2 penalty. But what HMS can maybe use to try and win the appeal is that they're saying that NASCAR showed poor communication. HMS sent a statement from their account saying, quote, "On Friday at Phoenix Raceway, NASCAR identified louvers on our race cars during a voluntary inspection 35 minutes after the opening of the garage and prior to on-track activity. NASCAR took possession of the parts approximately 4 hours later with no prior communication. The situation had no bearing on Saturday's qualifying session or Sunday's race." The statement cited several factors that include louvers provided to teams through NASCAR's mandated single-source supplier do not match the design submitted by the manufacturer and approved by NASCAR. Documented inconsistent and unclear communication by the sanctioning body specifically related to louvers. Recent comparable penalties issued by NASCAR have been related to issues discovered during a post-race inspection. So, an interesting strategy by Hendrick Motorsports to use poor communication and just lack of consistency, as they mentioned that the penalties that were issued to Hendrick are comparable to issues that you would see at a post-race inspection, not pre-race inspection. That is what Hendrick Motorsports is saying. And it's an interesting strategy. It's a bold strategy, but I don't see that working. When it comes with situations like this, NASCAR has been very consistent on modifying single source parts with the next gen car. Again, they did it with Keselowski and they did it with Michael McDowell. So it's an interesting strategy again, but I don't see that being enough to overturn this penalty. So it'll be difficult for Hendrick to appeal that. Don't think they will. It's not a situation like what we saw at Texas with Byron and Hamlin. They're not going to appeal that. Like, they're not going to win that case. I find that very, very difficult to believe. Speaking of Denny Hamlin, he also got in trouble with the law at NASCAR. During the latest episode of his podcast, Actions Detrimental, a topic was brought up between him and and Ross Chastain. Now, in my video on Sunday, I said that the incident between Hamlin and Ross, I thought at first was a racing incident. Denny confirmed, I would confirm that, nope, I did it on purpose.
And they were calling the one car on the outside. So at that point, I knew that I was screwed. I was about to go backwards. I had all the 4-tire cars on my ass. They were going to pass me, or more than likely in the next corner. If they didn't, I mean, I know I had 2 fresh tire cars underneath of me anyway. I was 4 wide. And I'm like, I'm going straight to the back.
Because he's around you, he's going to get a better run. You're in the middle.
And so at that point, I know that I'm going to my crew chief told me there was 18 cars on the lead lap. And at that point, I said, all right, well, I'm probably live looking at a picture. I'm probably running 6th or 7th. I'm about to get passed by everybody behind me who's on fresh tires. I'm about to finish in the mid-teens. And I said, you're coming with me, buddy.
Really?
I did.
Wow, that's not what I thought.
It wasn't a mistake. No, it wasn't a mistake.
Okay.
I unleashed, I let the wheel go, and I said, he's coming with me.
Well, NASCAR responded to that. Originally, they said they would have looked at it as a racing incident, but since Denny Hamlin outright said that he did it on purpose, NASCAR has fined him 25 driver points, not owner points, just driver points, and has fined him $50,000. Now, with the Hendrick Motorsports, it's pretty clear and dry. The Hamlin one, I think is too harsh. I would have been fine with just a fine, but not a points penalty because numerous things. Number one, you cannot have, if you want to have boys have at it, you have to let them handle it. You have to let them settle it out on the track. And it seems as though they did. The two met up after the race and they called a truce. When you look at what Hamlin did, Hamlin didn't wreck Chastain. Like, he didn't take him out. He didn't cause a caution. They kept going. He just kind of put him in the wall, and they went to the back. I would argue, I'd bring up an incident like, for example, with Chase Elliott and Denny Hamlin in 2017 at Phoenix. Elliott clearly put Hamlin in the wall. Clear as day. He did put him in the wall. It was on purpose. I mean, you have to be an idiot to not assume that. He may not have admitted it, but it was clear as day. It was on purpose. There was intent behind that move, and nothing happened from that. Well, now for this situation, again, yes, he did put him in the wall, but he didn't cause a caution. He didn't cause a crash. They, put him in the wall and they kept going. To suspend, not to suspend, but to penalize a driver for points for that, I'm not a fan of. I think you need to let drivers settle it on the track. And it seemed as though as they did. So for NASCAR to do that, I think was a bit harsh, a bit too harsh on that. This will be interesting moving forward, especially for Denny Hamlin, considering that on his podcast, if you haven't watched or listened to Actions Detrimental, highly recommend you do. It's a very entertaining podcast, but he opens up a lot about inside the works of NASCAR and also in the car and everything like that. So how will this affect how he talks in the future? Is he going to be as open as he has been in previous episodes? Is he still going to be, so forward, so truthful with everything? Because sometimes you may need to just shut your mouth just a little bit. But I personally do not agree with this move by NASCAR. I think if you're going to do something, just give him a $25,000 fine. I think that's it. But to penalize him points, not a fan of. But yeah, I mean, but to be fair, that's the least of Hamlin got off easy compared to Hendrick Motorsports. So let's talk about Hendrick Motorsports. Now, if we were in 2004, this would be extremely interesting considering that there's no win and you're in. You have to be in the top 10 in points. Obviously, with this win and you're in, Byron keeps his win. So he's locked in no matter what. He can be 38th in points and still finish all the races. He's locked into the championship or into the playoffs. So he's good. But you look at, Larson, you look at Alex Bowman. Those drivers, yes, they do need to win. And I do believe that they will win. So don't get me wrong. This is a huge fine. Again, the biggest in history, combined total of $400,000 in fines. I feel like it's not that big of a deal because it's Hendrick Motorsports. If it was an RFK or in front row, like what we saw last year, that's big. But for Hendrick Motorsports, and I could be jinxing it, but I don't think it's that big of a deal because of the playoffs. The playoffs allow you to suffer big hits and still make it. Again, you don't even have to be in the top 30. Just win a race and you're in. We know Larson can win and we know Bowman can win. So while yes, it is a big penalty, at the same time, it's not a big penalty. Yes, the only thing that is very concerning is the loss of the 10 playoff points, since I think Lars is now at like -7, I think, or I think -10, as well as Justin Haley. Justin Haley, that is going to hurt them big time to at least have a good shot at getting a good points finish. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, but at the very least having a good points finish. That is now big time trouble for them. But for Hendrick Motorsports, the only thing you have to worry about is those loss of playoff points. But again, those 100-point fines or those 100-point penalties, it's not a big deal because, again, you can just win a race. You're locked in. With Larson and Bowman, they can win races. They've shown they can win multiple races. Byron's already good. He's good. Chase Elliott, different situation with him and his broken left leg. Different circumstances, but still, if he can get back in time, I think he can win a race. So I find it interesting now with how NASCAR gives out penalties is that, yes, they are severe, but for certain teams at the same time, they're kind of meaningless. Yes, you do have to consider the fact that they're going to lose their crew chiefs for a month. For a month's time, they're going to lose their crew chiefs. But again, we saw what happened at Phoenix just now. Even with those hood lovers being taken away and they had to replace it with new ones, the two most dominating drivers was Byron and Larson. So it wouldn't, you know what I mean? So it's like, yes, it's a big penalty, but it's at the same time, it's not. So yeah, I think maybe for the 4 races that all the crew chiefs are out, it will affect Hendrick Motorsports some way, shape, or form. But when we get into the summertime, when we get, to tracks like Daytona, to the Indy Road Course, to Watkins Glen, Michigan, and when we get to those tracks and the crew chiefs are back, Charlotte, Kansas, when we get, I think Kansas by the time they'll be back by Kansas, I think. But when we get to the middle part of the season, during the summer stretch, and the crew chiefs at Hendrick Motorsports are back, I just don't think it's that big of a deal. So that's why it's good that NASCAR is being consistent with the penalties. But at the same time, it just doesn't feel, in my opinion, it doesn't feel severe. Like a penalty shouldn't matter, should hurt. That tells you, hey, don't do it again. But again, you send out a harsh penalty, but you give Hendrick Motorsports an easy out, an easy gateway. Just win a race. That's all you got to do. And boom, you're in the playoffs. You're in the top 16. You can race for a championship, When you modify a part of a car that you're not allowed to modify, big time penalties. Oh, no. Well, they're Hendrick Motorsports. After 4 races, they get their crew chiefs back and they can go back to winning races. We already know Chevrolet has an advantage on their car. Hendrick Motorsports is a top team at Chevrolet. So that's just my view on it. I think it's a big penalty, but at the same time, it's not a penalty because NASCAR has an easy out for those teams.